Top 10. Night falls, the wind howls through narrow alleys. An old wanderer, draped in tattered robes, sits beside a flickering fire. His eyes are deep, glinting with an eerie wisdom. His voice rasps, thick with the scent of time and death.
Have you ever heard of the demon barber? No? Then listen closely, but don't blame me if you can't sleep tonight.
One night, a young man, lost in the fog, stumbles upon the shop and pushes open the door. The bell chimes with a strangely ominous tone. You've come at the perfect time. I can make you look much better. The barber's voice slithers like a serpent's whisper. The young man sits in the worn leather chair, gripping the armrests, feeling something warm and slimy, as if someone had just left. The mirror before him is clouded, the dim candlelight dancing against the yellowed walls. The scissors snip, but it isn't hair falling to the floor, it's chunks of scalp. The young man's mouth opens to scream, but his throat is frozen. His eyes widen, staring into the mirror where his reflection is gone. The barber looms behind him, slowly leaning in, his breath as cold as death. Do you know why they never leave? Because they're still here, forever. Suddenly, the shop door explodes open. A figure in a black cloak appears, forming a mystic seal with his hands. A sound echoes through the air. The barbershop, the old man, the young victim, the cloaked figures, they all begin to blur, like a painting being erased. The scene shifts. A cold, desolate room, its walls covered in strange symbols. In the center stands a demon, its skin slick and black, its eyes glowing in the darkness. Before it lies a thick tome titled 1001 Deaths, the Soul Harvest Project. The demon licks its lips, scanning the list before it. The soul count for today, still not enough. Death number 665 did not meet the feared quota. It mutters, then cackles. No matter, I'll rewrite the script. Something even more terrifying. It reaches out, grasping a quill made of human bone, and begins to write. And then, the barbershop reappears, the young man stepping through the door once more. The bell chimes. The soul harvesting game resumes. Top 9. If one night, someone appears at your window and tells you they can take you to a land with no aging, no sorrow, don't go. Wendy woke up in the middle of the night, a cold breeze slipping through the
Deck
window.
the halls with boughs of holly, la 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 la.
His smile was as
Tis
bright
the
as the
season
stars.
to be
His eyes as
jolly,
clear
la la
as the
la la
ocean.
la la la
But Wendy couldn't see his shadow.
Don we know our
He reached out
gay
his hand,
apparel,
promising
la la
a
la
magical
la
remedy.
la la.
She hesitated,
Troll the
but John and
ancient
Michael
Yuletide
already taken
carol,
his
la la la
Wendy didn't want to leave
la
the
la.
So, she took Asta's hand. The moment she did, she felt something being pulled out of her body. Neverland looked like a dream. Lush green forests, waterfalls shimmering in all the colors of the rainbow, a soft breeze carrying the laughter of children. But why was there no scent, no birds singing, no rustling leaves, no shadows? Everything was too perfect. Until Wendy looked closer, she saw the holes. Not pits, not cracks, but millions, billions of tiny holes. On the petals, on the leaves, on the rocks, on her own skin. Wendy, I feel weird. John turned around, raising a trembling hand. The holes on his skin were spreading, his eyes loosing their pupils. Michael, Wendy, gasped, dot dot. The boy smiled, but his teeth had vanished. Only a gaping black void remained. Wendy stumbled back, horrified. Peter was still there, still smiling. But when Wendy looked closer, he had no face, only holes. She wanted to run, but Neverland had no way out. Every path led back to the same place. Everything she touched crumbled, revealing a dark abyss underneath. She looked down at her own hands. The holes were expanding. Then one night, Wendy found herself standing on the windowsill of a strange house. Inside, 3 children were fast asleep. She reached out her hand, and then, for a fleeting moment, she saw her reflection in the window glass. John, Michael, they stood beside her, and behind them, a massive entity covered in endless holes, breathing, and so, the cycle repeats. Top 8. Genji Village, Sengoku era. A blood-red moon loomed over the rooftops, the wind howling through wooden eaves, carrying the stench of soot and burning steel. In the village's darkest corner, the forge still blazed. Masaru, a master swordsmith, stood frozen before the unfinished blade. Sweat dripped down his wrinkled face, but as he wiped it away, it wasn't sweat anymore, it was blood. His cracked hands bled, crimson droplets splattering onto the glowing steel. And at that very moment, the sword trembled. A whisper slithered through the air, a breath, a sigh, or the wind passing through the hollow eyes of the dead. The hammer in his grip shook. Masaru knew if he struck the final blow, he would create his greatest masterpiece. But in that same moment, he understood. If this strike landed, what would be born would no longer be a sword. Just as he moved to drop the hammer, an invisible force seized his wrist. The next morning, they found Masaru slumped beside the forge, his lifeless eyes wide open, both arms severed at the elbows. Beside him, the sword lay untouched, unfinished. Genjutsu, no one dared to touch it. But war does not wait for fear. Years later, a young warlord named Hidetora led his men to conquest. He had heard of the cursed sword, and with the arrogance of a man who had never known fear, he claimed Genjutsu as his own. That night, Hidetora could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the slow, rhythmic pounding of a hammer. He opened his eyes. The room was steeped in darkness, yet he wasn't alone. A gaunt figure stood at the foot of his bed, its hollow eyes locked onto him. The next morning, Hidetora slaughtered his entire guard. He didn't remember doing it. He only remembered the sword in his hands, lighter than air, yet sharper and more insatiable than anything he had ever wielded. And each time the blade met flesh, the whisper returned. Each strike claimed another soul. Hidetora didn't realize. He was no longer Genjutsu's master. He was its puppet. No one who had ever wielded the sword had escaped its grasp. Once they touched it, they could never let go. Their skin fused to the hilt as if seared in place, forcing them to kill, to keep killing, until the sword consumed them whole. Over time, Genjutsu was no longer just a sword. It became something else, a nightmare that would never end. Centuries passed, wars ended, Genji village was abandoned, left to rot, but the forge remained standing, untouched by time. No one knew where Genjutsu had gone, yet travelers who wandered too close to the ruins swore they could hear it, the echo of a hammer striking steel in the dead of night, woven into the howling wind. One day, a stranger arrived at the forsaken village. Inside an old hut, he found a wooden chest bound in rusted chains. He didn't know why, but he couldn't look away. His hands trembled as he unlatched the lock. The lid creaked open. The blade gleamed in the darkness. All sound vanished. The wind stopped. The flames dimmed. Then, from the depths of the sword, a voice whispered. Top 7. The Black Demon, Hyosube. A curse with no escape. Tokyo and Tress. I am a cold night. Empty streets. Neon lights flicker in the alleys. Tomoya, a night shift office worker, trudges home, exhausted. A small, shadowy figure darts across the street, too fast for the human eye to catch. Tomoya freezes. A shiver crawls up his spine, and then a childish giggle echoes behind him. Distant giggling, eerie and fading. He whirls around, nothing. But further down, at an old bus stop, an old beggar trembles. His cloudy eyes lock onto Tomoya's, filled with terror. You saw it, didn't you? Tomoya frowns. Saw what? The old man grips his wrist, his whisper like a curse. Hyosube, the black demon of the river. Those who see it will die in agony. Tomoya arrives home. He flips on the light, everything seems normal. But as he steps into the bathroom, the mirror smeared with wet, black handprints. The door behind him, his heartbeat pounds in his ears. He slowly turns. Nothing, but on the floor, a trail of wet footprints, creeping toward him. Tomoya burns with fever. Each time he coughs, he spits out clumps of slick, black hair. His nails begin falling off, his skin peeling. A foul stench rises from his body, like a rotting corpse. And in his head, a giggle echoes. Desperate, Tomoya stumbles into a secluded shrine. Inside, an old monk sits motionless, candlelight flickering in the dim space. Slowly, the monk opens his eyes. You have been chosen. No one can save you. Tomoya, frantic. No, there must be a way. The monk slowly shakes his head, and then he smiles. A twisted, unnatural grin. Take your own life, before it takes your soul. And then, the monk laughs hysterically. His eyes roll back, his mouth splitting open far too wide. Inside, a writhing black mass crawls forward. Tomoya screams. Tomoya jolts awake, gasping for air. He's back in his apartment. Outside, Tokyo still glows with neon lights. Everything is normal. But then, a giggle from the dark corner of the room. Tomoya turns his head, staring into the mirror, and in the reflection, he's smiling. Wide, unnatural, his eyes pure white, his mouth stretched far beyond human limits. Top 6. In a small fishing village along the coast of Maine, people whispered about an ancient curse. Whenever the sea raged, someone from the village would vanish without a trace. Jonah, the son of an old fisherman named William, never believed in such tales until the night that changed everything. A violent storm struck, and Jonah's father, along with 5 other fishermen, set out to sea. By morning, they hadn't returned. Their boat washed up on shore, broken and covered in deep claw-like scratches, as if something had dragged them down into the depths. From that night on, Jonah began hearing whispers from the ocean. One evening, he followed the voices to the shore and saw a mysterious girl standing in the moonlight. She had long flowing hair and eyes as deep as the sea. "My name is Miriam," she said. "I can help you find your father." She took Jonah beneath the waves, where he saw his father and the lost villagers, trapped, frozen in time. Miriam told him that only by burning a seashell necklace, cursed centuries ago, could he break the spell and set them free. After searching desperately, Jonah found the necklace in the abandoned home of an old woman, Sarah, the last descendant of the one who cast the curse. On the night of the full moon, Jonah climbed the old lighthouse and set the necklace on fire. The wind howled, waves crashed wildly, and glowing spirits rose into the night sky before vanishing. By morning, the lost fishermen lay on the shore, alive as if they had just been returned from another world. The curse was broken. But even now, whenever Jonah looks out to sea, he sometimes sees Miriam's figure among the waves, forever a part of the ocean's secrets. Top 5. There is an ancient Japanese legend about a samurai and a kitsune, a tale of fate, love, and sacrifice. That night, amidst the mystical fog, Samurai Ryo wandered into destiny. Screams pierced the air. He saw hunters surrounding a girl in a white kimono. "She is not human. Kill her before she turns into a fox demon," they shouted. Unable to stand by, Ryo drew his sword. The blade flashed, and the hunters fled. The girl, Mew, whispered, "People fear what they do not understand." Then, like a wisp of smoke, she vanished, leaving a single white flower in his hand. The next morning, Ryo noticed his reflection, and the sword was no longer his own. His memories began to fade. Each night, Mew appeared, trying to remind him of who he was. "Ryo, you saved me," she pleaded, but he stared at her with hollow eyes. "Mew, do I know you?" On the night of the blood moon, Ryo knelt, consumed by darkness. "Let go. Your humanity is long gone." Sinister whispers coiled around him. Mew rushed forward, placing her trembling hands on his chest. Memories flooded back battles, honor, love. "If you still love me, remember." A blinding light erupted, shattering the curse. The vengeful spirits dissolved, but as the glow faded, Mew collapsed. Ryo's hands trembled, stained with blood. "Mew, no." She smiled weakly. "You remember, that is enough." Then she dissolved into 1,000 white petals. The darkness receded, leaving behind only a lone samurai, clutching a single white flower. And so, the legend of the kitsune's curse lives on. A love bound by fate, yet love itself was the key to breaking destiny's chains.